Well, folks, we have a big one for you today. The number one insider for Nintendo, and honestly, just one of the biggest gaming insiders in the world, Nate the Hate, has dropped a podcast today where he revealed a bunch of things going on behind the scenes, including news about a Nintendo Direct. And if you just want the skinny quick, yes, he is saying there will be a Nintendo Direct in July. We're going to see exactly what he had to say about that. We're going to play the clip for you. We're also going to end up revisiting Beat 'em Ups, who is the originating source on there being a Direct in July, because he actually had some games he said could be happening in this Direct. We'll go over that just to remind you guys. But more than that, we have some answers to some things that I've always wondered about. That is, of course, if you actually trust that Nate the Hate has sources, which I don't know how anyone can doubt at this point that he legitimately knows game developers and all of that, including things like why third-party games aren't being announced right now, what is going on with that, and also what's going on with the dev kit situation with indie developers, and why are certain games on Switch 2 that are having compatibility issues with backwards compatibility not fixed. We have a whole bunch of this stuff. Basically, we have answers to all of it. So shout out to Nate the Hate and obviously Modern Vintage Gamer, who host their podcast over on the Nate the Hate channel. But yes, folks, this is really exciting stuff. And I am, man, that's what the whole video is about. It's not like a gathering of news. It's literally just about his podcast and then revisiting some beat 'em up stuff. So before I dive in, I want to remind you we are giving away 5 copies of Donkey Kong Bananza. You can go ahead and enter down in the link in the pinned comment or to the description. We are actually drawing the winners tomorrow, and we'll probably have a new giveaway coming. I'm still wrapping my brain about what we're going to do. Maybe you guys can let me know down below. I've been considering Pro Controllers and eShop gift cards just because we don't really know major release dates of games yet, like the major games people really care about. So I've been debating on something like that, or maybe a Switch 2 game of choice. You know, maybe we give away like 3 Switch 2 games of choice and you can just choose whatever game you want for your Switch 2. I don't know. Let me know if you like any of those ideas, as I'm still trying to figure it out. That being said, we got this clip about the Nintendo Direct directly from Nate the Hate. Here is his podcast. We'll go ahead and link this down below. And here is what he actually had to say.
28th up to the 31st, because the 1st of August is obviously a new month and the financials.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, the timing is just my speculation. The week prior, you have the Pokemon Presents on July 22nd.
Right.
So would there be 2 presentations that week? It's not unprecedented. It wouldn't be an impossibility to happen. It's just right now, as we record this, my information is just there's no Direct before the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza.
Yeah.
So at minimum, we're not seeing one until after the 17th.
Yeah. Makes total sense to me.
I mean, this is information that I will naturally get updated on as the days go on. And if I get an update, I will provide that. So all I can say right now is I'm hearing there is a Direct this month, and it will be after Donkey Kong releases. I don't have any specific timing as to when it will take place beyond that.
All right. You heard it here first.
Hopefully that kind of calms a little bit of the weekly rumors where every single day there's a new rumor saying the Direct's on July 10th, July 11th, July 12th, 13th, 14th. If you say every day of the year,
you get it right.
Eventually, you will be right. So yes, should be. I also don't know the format of the Direct. Yeah. So I don't know if it's a general Direct, if it's a partner Direct.
Could be a partner showcase based on what we were just talking about. Could very easily be a partner showcase.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. With Nintendo Today app, technically speaking, I'm not saying I want Nintendo to do this, but technically, they could just go to Nintendo Today and say, Metroid Prime 4 coming out November 15th. They don't need to release a new trailer. They don't need to headline that in a Direct.
Yeah.
So I don't know the format of the Direct. It could be a partner showcase. I hope a general Direct. So if you're going to make headlines, if you're going to post this to Reddit, if you're going to post this to Famaboard, to Reset Era, if you're going to make a YouTube video about this, provide the proper context. And I will now repeat the proper context for you. I have been told a Direct is coming in the month of July following the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza. I do not know the format of the Direct, and I don't know the exact day or week. All I know is it will take place in the latter half of July. That's the quote to use.
All right. So you can see there, he's wanted to make sure that the context is out there. And it is important because context does matter. And I say this all the time, that context matters. I try really hard not to put misinformation and stuff out there or misinterpret people's words. Obviously, opinions are what they are and speculation is what it is. We have a lot to talk about this on the podcast. But one thing we want to revisit quick is on the Nintendo podcast, Beat 'em Ups actually said that there was going to be a direct this month. He said this back at the end of June, but we've known about that. We've talked about that. And this seems to be vindication that maybe his source is right. But if his source about there being a direct in July is right, and now Nate the Hate is saying there's also a direct in July, then maybe the source is right about some of the games that will be in the direct. So let's go take a look at that game list. We have it over on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit. Metaphor Refantasio, GameCube Shadow Drop of Pokemon Coliseum, which I find interesting because there's a Pokemon Presents happening next week. So having that shadow dropped in a direct, I think it's just kind of fascinating considering that there's an entire dedicated Pokemon event. But hey, you know, maybe continue that Pokemon love. Death Stranding Director's Cut S. I think that's important to note because maybe that gives faint hope that maybe Death Stranding 2 at one point in the future could come to Switch 2. The Witcher 3 Nintendo Switch 2 edition, which would be pretty welcome, I would say. Metroid Prime 4's release date. And then the one more thing towards the end of that direct, using Isabelle to basically tease an Animal Crossing 2026. Now, this obviously is not enough games to make up an entire direct. There would be significantly more games than that. This isn't like those Xbox Directs where there's only 5 or 6 games. Nintendo Directs have dozens of games. So there would be more in the direct, but those are just the games that Beat 'em Ups was told about. Obviously, he didn't seem as confident on the games as he was with his confidence on there being a direct in July, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, folks, this is a really big deal. Nintendo Directs are always a really big deal. And what's also a really big deal is what else Nate the Hate had to say about what's going on behind the scenes with Nintendo. This is a new section for the video because it's a really long podcast that he has. So we're just going to break down what he said. And look, guys, here's some gameplay of DK Bananza because I'm really excited for it coming out this week. No, not spoiler gameplay. These are just the official trailers. But hey, here's what Nate the Hate had to say. So Nintendo is still treating dev kits like they are a trade secret for some reason, especially with indie developers. Many have requested dev kits months ago, but they were told by their Nintendo representative that they would get back to them when the time is right. It's now July, and most haven't heard anything. Now, this situation actually gets a little wilder because it looks like we know why Nintendo hasn't handed those indie developers dev kits. So, Nate the Hate said he had one conversation with a developer friend who was talking to Nintendo about dev kits. And Nintendo asked them what some of their upcoming games are going to be. And this is actually pretty normal. Nate noted that this is the way it works on all platforms. When you're handing out dev kits, you want to know what they need the dev kits for. It's pretty typical. And Nintendo, after hearing about the games, concluded to them that they don't actually need a Switch 2 dev kit right now because you're still focusing on Switch 1 software. It's one of those things about backwards compatibility is, hey, if you're still focusing on Switch 1 software, why the hell do you need a Switch 2 dev kit? That's Nintendo's logic. I'm not saying I agree with it. Then he says the developer then told Nintendo they wanted to do native Switch 2 releases, and Nintendo's response was, these games aren't a priority for us. So in other words, Nintendo is not prioritizing people wanting to do Switch 2 versions of Switch 1 games. So that is kind of interesting, especially since Witcher 3 Switch 2 edition is one of the rumored games for the Direct. Then again, we know they put Cyberpunk, so we know they have dev kits already, right? So they can kind of do what they want there. And obviously they're a AAA studio, which might get preferential treatment. But still, it's kind of interesting that Nintendo's doing that, assuming that Nate the Hate sources are true, and I have no reason to doubt them. This sucks. They actually did this at the beginning of the Switch generation as well. So the context here, and Modern Vintage Gamer helped provide this context, as did Nate the Hate. I said this is exactly what Nintendo did at the launch of Switch. So one of the public evidences of this is Axiom Verge's developer was actually extremely pissed off about this and very vocal about it back in 2017 because Nintendo was telling people they didn't want Wii U ports and instead were focusing on games coming exclusively to Switch. not 3DS or Wii U. They're basically doing the exact same thing with Switch 2 dev kits. And I think at first that sounds fine about Nintendo focusing on games that are exclusively coming to Switch 2, especially with backwards compatibility for Switch 1. But there's a problem. Some indie games and other games have compatibility issues with the Nintendo Switch 2. So they're backwards compatible, but they're broken or they don't function or there's major problems. And these developers want to fix those problems so they function properly on Switch 2. And you know, Modern Vintage Gamer actually talked about this directly. For those who don't know, he actually works at Limited Run Games, and he had to be very careful. You know, he had to be very careful what he says because Limited Run Games does have dev kits, but they actually had backward compatibility issues with some of their games from Limited Run, and they were able to fix them because, yeah, they do have dev kits. Now, maybe they were able to convince Nintendo to have dev kits because they have upcoming Switch 2 exclusive games, so maybe that's why they had the dev kits, and they just use it to retroactively fix games. Modern Vintage Gamer can't talk about that stuff. Obviously, that's why he has to be very careful. But yeah, they're able to fix the games. Now all these other indie developers can't because they don't have a Switch 2 only project in the works. So it sounds like if you're an indie developer out there and you want to get a dev kit, you need to pitch to Nintendo you're working on a project that's only going to be on Switch 2 and not Switch 1, which for indie devs might not be a smart move considering that Switch 1 has a majority of the Nintendo install base. But it will get you a dev kit. So I don't know. I guess balance out that argument with Nintendo. Their best guess is that they're going to end up opening up this stuff after the holidays heading into 2026 because that's basically what they did with Switch. They opened it up after holiday 2017 to everyone able to get dev kits. But right now, Nintendo wants to focus on companies that are making Switch 2 only games. It's kind of weird they're doing that. Maybe they just have a limited number of dev kits. I don't know why they couldn't just make more, but take that for what you will. That's how they handled it with Switch. That's what they're doing with Switch 2. Maybe Furukawa's like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Switch 1 is our most successful platform of all time. So why not do the exact same process with Switch 2? Maybe that's the business logic. I don't know. I don't agree with it, but I also don't agree with this other thing they're doing. And I've been very vocal about this. Nate the Hate came straight out and talked about why third-party games are not being announced because he knows that fans are frustrated seeing all these game announcements and no Switch 2 logos. Besides one game from Arc System Works, that seems to be an exception, although it was a visual novel, so probably not something Nintendo's going to push super hard. No offense to visual novels, just Nintendo usually doesn't do that. He's just straight out said he knows from his sources that Nintendo is preventing some third-party partners from announcing their games because they want those announcements in the next Nintendo Direct. Now, folks, you come back to me here. Look, I've been very vocal about this because Nintendo did factually do this many times throughout the Switch generation where a game would get announced at this event and then months later appear in a Nintendo Direct, and sometimes it's even launching the same day. To me, this was always ridiculous. It was Nintendo trying to be like, our platform is different and special compared to others, and so we need to make sure that it comes here. And I understood in year one of Switch, like that's what led to surprise announcements like Doom that really took people by storm. But we're not like that anymore. We're with a platform that third parties are excited for. You're coming off a massively successful platform. You were coming off a failed platform in Wii U in the past. So you can understand when maybe you didn't want to slam the third party announcements and actually trickle them and have big surprises that would excite people. But the excitement of playing AAA games on the go, that level of excitement is gone, right? That was a big selling point for Switch 1. Switch 2 now, you just expect those games to be here. When you buy a handheld PC, you expect to be able to play AAA games on the go. Obviously, when you're playing Switch 2, again, as I said, you just expect to play AAA games on the go. So that excitement is no longer there. We don't need that level of surprise. What we need is more games announced. If you go to the eShop, if you actually sort it by like Switch 2 only games, the library is very thin, which of course it is for every system shortly after launch. But the bottom line is it's not just thin on current games, it's thin on upcoming games. So games to get excited about. Yeah, we have Madden, we have WWE 2K coming out this month. We have Madden next month. Obviously NBA 2K coming out later. And yeah, obviously that visual novel from Arc System Works. But the point is that I think that this is just a bad look for Nintendo. I feel like they're holding third parties back in ways that are not beneficial to the third party. And I question if they're beneficial for Nintendo. As an example, let's say at this next Nintendo Direct, which is happening this month, according to them, that there is a Call of Duty trailer, right? That's cool. That's exciting. I'm glad Call of Duty's coming to Switch 2 this year. Why couldn't they have the logo back at the Microsoft event in June? It would have been just as big of a deal back then as it is now. In fact, it would have been giving equal treatment the same way that they treat PlayStation 5, Xbox, and PC. Getting treated special works sometimes, but I think there's only like very specific games that you should do that with. Like, let's say Grand Theft Auto 6 is coming to Switch 2. I can understand that being saved for like a special announcement, but a franchise that comes out every year, you know, Madden, NBA, WWE, why can't we know about a yearly franchise in Call of Duty coming over? That doesn't make any sense. So I'm just going to sit back and see what happens. Obviously, the expectation here, and based on probably what Nate the Hate knows, and things I've even heard from games I know are coming to Switch 2 that haven't been announced yet, there's probably going to be a lot of third-party games in this Direct. Could be a partner showcase of sorts, obviously, or it could be a general. Like, you know, it could be like a 30, 40-minute Direct that just have a ton of shit packed into it. So that's what I'm hoping. So we'll see what happens. If Beat 'em Ups is right, it definitely is a general Direct because they're not going to announce Animal Crossing. Even in a Nintendo Direct Mini, I don't think they would announce Animal Crossing. And they have so many third-party games to probably announce that a Mini doesn't make sense because they have a lot of AAA third-party games to announce, especially because, hey, they're not allowing a lot of indies to even have the dang thing. And Silksong could even be in this damn thing, I guess, is one example of a company that may or may not have Switch 2 dev kits. We obviously don't know. So we're going to sit back and just see what happens. For right now, I'm just going to say I'm really excited that there's going to be a Direct this month. I do not understand some of these business decisions Nintendo makes. We're going to have deeper conversations on these decisions and the Direct with predictions and more this upcoming Wednesday on the Nintendo Byte podcast. In fact, that podcast is going to be set up later today so you guys can go set your notifications. Once it is, I'll put a link down in the description as well so you can go to that. I'm excited because we have some really amazing people on our show this week. So this is going to be like a banger episode. I'm just grabbing the guest list. I know about a couple of the guests, but I think we have 3 guests this week, and they couldn't be on a potentially better show than a Direct reaction show. That's obviously the best one to come on. But as I look at the guest list here for this week, holy crap. We have N64 Josh coming on. We have Favlam coming on. And then we have Rogers Base, baby. Woo, woo! Oh, I'm really excited to have Rogers Base coming back. This is always exciting to have him coming on. We have a banger show as well the week after and the week after that. We got 3 back-to-back banger shows with our guests. I'm really excited about that. So again, Rogers Base, Favlam, N64 Josh, they're all coming on the podcast this week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central. Be there. We're going to be talking about the Direct. We're going to be talking about Donkey Kong Bonanza and so much more. You're not going to want to miss these topics, guys. I'm really excited. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.